What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Blue River Bow Hunting Podcast, episode 115. What's going on, Dylan?
Just trying to make it through this heat, man.
Yeah, especially with your AC going out and all that, man. That sounds like a
Dude,
boatload of problems.
It's cooler to go turkey hunting than it is to sit at home right now.
Well, if we weren't podcasting, I'm sure you'd be in the turkey woods for sure. But this week we got Spencer Sutliff from Domain, man. What's going on, buddy?
Not too much. We're just running the road as usual for Domain, and we're down here in Alabama today. So I've been driving through the heat. I know what you guys have been saying, but yeah, it was like 92 degrees here and pretty spicy. I think I sat out in the sun by the pool at the event we're at for about 1 hour today, and I am red as a tomato right here on my chest.
Yeah, I bet, man. What kind of event are you working down there?
Yeah, we're just doing a small little dealer event. So no consumers at this one, more of just like a manager meeting for some guys, kind of in this area. So yeah, super easy.
Well, buddy, for somebody that doesn't know yourself, introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, my name's Spencer. I run the road for Domain as far as like shows go. And then also I handle a bunch of sales. So have a bunch of customers, I guess our clients or, store locations, archery shops, hardware store, those kind of people. So pretty much just sales, and then I handle a bunch of customer support too. So a lot of guys, calling, asking questions, and stuff like this too, podcasts, and that's kind of the more of what I do with Domain. So yeah,
talk about your hunting background. I can hear the accent in your voice. It sounds a lot like Wisconsin to me.
Oh yeah, we're a beer loving, cheese eating state, that's for sure up there. But grew up hunting with dad. He was never a bow hunter, so I'm first generation bow hunter. I did get him into it now, but as far as hunting background goes, pretty much just whitetails, man. We like the whitetails. I'll occasionally go out with some buddies down to Texas, do some exotic hunts, just for fun. But it's gonna be whitetails and turkeys for the most part. But
I got to go up to Wisconsin in 2020 and hunted Buffalo County, Wisconsin, and oh my gosh, the size of I live in ag country here in Indiana. We got big bodied deer, but I felt like your guys' population really blew me out of the way. I mean, I saw 30 to 50 deer every day that I was in the stand. There was no short of numbers by any means.
Yeah, I mean, with social media too, passing deer and letting the young ones go is becoming more and more common, and I'm thankful for it. People say, well, don't shoot what makes or shoot what makes you happy, but if a guy wants to shoot a big buck because that's what makes him happy, I'm all for it, because the more neighbors we can get passing big deer too, to get them the great deer, I think we're one step further to, everybody, making their dream of shooting that 200 more possible. So, I'm all for that. Absolutely. And there's a lot of deer in Wisconsin, man. I'm not dissing that. There's, you drive a couple miles in Wisconsin, you'll see 100 deer. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. I loved it up there. I got a small town kind of feel. I'm from a small town, but like they really welcomed me in. Like I got there like a couple days before, it was about the only time I've ever been to an outfitter. During the COVID time, I was like, hey, I got a little bit of extra money. I'm going to go on a hunt. I've never done this before. I'm going for it. And I got there like a day early, and I went into town right along the Mississippi River. I can't remember. I have to look it up after we're done. But it was a small little river town. There was some bars and stuff like that, and it was Sunday. They were watching Packer football. I went in there, drank beer with them, ate chili, grilled cheese, all that. I mean, I had an absolute blast, and they knew that I was not from there. They're like, "You're in here to deer hunt this week, aren't you?" I'm like, "Absolutely."
Yep. That's awesome. Okay.
Well, I'm actually thinking about putting Wisconsin on my schedule this year in my rotation. I think it may be possible. I like how I don't know if they still do it or not. Do they still do the first time licensed buyer in the state? It's like $67 or something like that.
I don't know. I've heard of that. Obviously, I don't buy out of state tags, so I'm not sure on that actually. But
yeah.
Kudos to the state if they do.
Yeah, well, that's how it was when I initially went up there. That in 2020, my license was like $67 because I was a first time buyer for the state or whatever, which is freaking incredible, really.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. Do. I mean, that's a great out of state opportunity, especially for first timers. you know, and
sure.
I wish other states did that too, because that'd make my life a lot cheaper.
That would make my
Yeah,
life
for
a lot
sure.
cheaper too.
Yep.
But what we want to do tonight with Spencer on the podcast, with being from Domain, we want to really focus on food plots, spring, fall, that kind of thing. It's kind of going to be a food plot 101, or where to start, or we get a lot of questions. Dylan gets a lot of questions towards him on what he's doing and all that. So it's basically going to be a food plot 101. So my first question would be, like, where do you start? Like location, size, that sort of thing. Where do you start at?
I mean, I think the main thing is make sure you can get 3 or more hours of sunlight on wherever you want to put a food plot. Not saying it's impossible to do it without it, but it's going to make your life a lot easier. The reason I say that is because a lot of guys start, I would say myself definitely, and I think everybody that works for Domain, their first food plot was in the woods, small, right next to that stand that they're always hunting. But make sure you can get sunlight on it. Because, just like every single plant, photosynthesis has to take place. And, you need that sunlight to get to the plant to grow. So wherever you're thinking about doing your first food plot, if you've already got one going, make sure you got sunlight going. I would say that's, your number one step. If it's your grandpa's woods or your old man's or something, talk to them and make sure you can trim a few branches and just tell them, hey, we're going to make a little clover spot here. Because clovers are typically what, you're putting in those small little shaded wood plots, because that handles it the best.
Mm-hmm.
But make sure you can cut down a couple trees, and, there's ways of talking them into it. And especially, like, I know, for example, my grandfather, he don't want us cutting trees down there, but
Right.
he saw the difference it makes for whitetails. And once you open their eyes up about that, it's pretty crazy, how many deer you can attract to a half-acre area, especially if you're surrounded by timber. Even like egg country too, as soon as those crops come off, there's nothing left.
Right.
So, the big thing is making sure that sunlight's available. But yeah, that's number one step.
Dylan, you've done like quite a bit of hinge cutting when it comes to like clearing out spots and stuff like that for the start plots, right?
Yeah. So what I have, I was trying to tell Brett I was like, there's always two levels to the food plot thing. There's your throw and grow guys, and then there's your guys who are thinking of fertilizer, soil testing, rotation of the crops. So what I have done on my farm is I'm not just putting food plots in. I'm doing bedding first, getting super thick bedding, and then on all edges of my bedding, I'm cutting in just food plots, half acre to acre plots surrounding the bed, and then I'll rotate those crops, throughout. Like, and I know a few people doing this. I'm sure you do, being in it, but I will start planting pretty much in February, like whatever I can get out then, and then I'll stage plant and stagger my plots all through the year, just different things. That way, all the way up until the following February, they're still got, turnips or whatever it may be. So I'm fortunate to just keep food plots out. I try to keep them out year round, but I've really been big on the bedding right on the edges, and then I've quit cutting hard, like just straight square fields, starting to do 10, 15 yards of just thorns and brush, letting it grow up, and then doing screens. So like last year I done one field, and then I just zigzag corn all through it, where I could see all of it, but I knew that buck had to come out and physically check each little segment. So I mean, it's just one of those complex things that, as far as you want to take it, I feel like you can really run with it and do mazes with it.
Right. And if guys too, I want to touch on that throw and grow, because that's a very soft word. I don't want to say nothing, but there are very few seeds that you can throw and go, or throw and grow. Every seed needs to hit dirt. For the guys that aren't listening, not you guys, but for the guys that are listening, make sure your seed gets seed to soil contact. I guess that's probably the number one step on top of the sunlight. But the throw and grow term, it's a great term. It gets a lot of eyes, but make sure that seed gets soil contact. Try to rake it in if you can. That's going to help yourself out a lot. And then two, like, food all year long is super important. That's why we love clovers. Clovers are there for, perennial clovers are there for multiple years. We really push having clover on every single property. A lot of guys too that we talk to, that probably, like you said, or your throw and grow guys, they're like, I don't want clover because they've heard of it. They can grow clover. They want those big turnips and radishes, because they're sweet and you see them on TV and,
Right.
bigger the radish, the more bragging, right? So,
Right.
they want those, Facebook pictures or TV pictures. But, some properties just aren't suited for it, and I've seen, hell, I've had Big Sexy, which is our turnip and radish mix, next to our comeback kid, which is our clover mix. And in early October, they're in that clover more than they're in those brassicas, just because it's not the time of year,
Right.
So I think don't overlook the clovers,
Yeah. No, that's what I had that same experience last year. Last year I rotated turnips, radish, corn, and iron clay peas.
Yep.
And I had an issue with the deer bedding in the peas more than they were eating the peas because it got so thick. But then every time, do what?
How tall were they?
Oh, they got like probably 4 or 5 foot tall. And I'd planted corn all in it, so it gave the vine something to run up. And man, on the edges of that, they were just tearing up the clover, like just absolutely demolishing it. And I told Brett this year, I have put out some domain this year already, and I've got some clover plots coming in, super nice.
Sweet.
It's just one of those things where you're right, people overlook it because it's not as pretty. It kind of looks like somebody's yard almost. So they're like, no, we're going corn or something.
They want to
like
go
that.
all out when they don't realize clover is going all out. As far as
and it comes back. That's what's so beautiful about it.
Yeah, and the next year even better than the first year.
Even during the velvet hunt last year in Tennessee, when I was hunting off of those peas, they were hitting the edges of that very hard. That's basically where I saw the deer every time I hunted in that particular spot. But they were hitting that stuff pretty hard, even in August.
Right. And clover's going to get hit mostly all year. Especially where you guys are at. You don't get a whole lot of snow cover. Wisconsin, that's where any northern state, that's where we're going to really stress those brassicas, your turnips and radishes. Because as soon as snow flies and there's a foot, 6 inches or more of snow, which happens every year for us, on that clover, they're not digging deep for the clover. We've seen it, but it's not as common. And that's where those deer are really going to turn to those brassicas and radishes. And like you said too earlier, Dylan, having multiple different food sources and different variety is going to be more beneficial on a property. Because just like humans, you don't want to eat the same food every day. You want a little variety. You want the buffet. So if you can give them the buffet, you're going to be all that much better off.
Yeah, and I've learned this firsthand from seeing it. But I hear a lot of people, they'll reach out to me and hit me up about, well, I planted this big plot and the deer didn't touch it. I'm like, okay, well, does anybody have that planted around you at all? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, well, then they're not typically going to hit it the first year. It takes them a little bit of time to figure out that that's edible. And they're like, oh, no, they should just know. I'm like, I don't understand it, but I promise you, plant it again next year, they'll hit it. Because the first year that I done turnips here, they did not touch them. The second year, none of them reached max growth because they were eating them before they grew.
Yeah, and I've always heard that, and unfortunately, our property is surrounded by swamp and hardcore timber. We don't have, we're not in ag country. My dad and myself, where our farm's located, and man, our food plots get wiped out. We're pushing 5 acres that we're planting there, and if we don't fence anything, nothing's going to grow. Because we have all the pulling power on, between the neighbors, and it's great, but it's just. I could plant our whole farm, our 40-acre farm in food, and there just wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
So, we've never realized that, but my buddy's farms, and I have seen it for sure,
Yeah, it just blew my mind. And then especially like this past summer, the turnips late when it got real cold and they were still super green. I mean, it was day and night difference from I went in on a Friday and the field was partially full. And then by that Sunday, after that cold snap, they had picked it completely clean. And it was like they just love it when it's super cold like that after that first frost.
Yep, absolutely.
What about, soil testing? And is soil testing going to sway what you plant or when you plant, or how does that work?
I would say the soil test definitely will tell you, the nutrients that's going to be needed in the soil. Some soils are more suitable for planting more stuff. If like sandy soils where I'm at, it's a little harder to get that clover to grow in full sunlight because the soil gets so dang dry and it kind of burns up. That's why like all of our wood plots, semi-shaded plots will do that. But soil tests are definitely important because first thing you need to know your pH. Optimal 7.0. Typically, soils are acidic. You're looking at that 5.5 to 6.5. Your first year, which some soils are 7.0 right on the dot. But you want to know your pH to know how much lime to add because when your pH is neutral at 7, there's gonna be it's more available for all those nutrients to get to the plant. It basically opens up the doors of nutrients to flow to that plant. If your pH is low, those doors are closed and your plants aren't going to accumulate too much, no matter how much fertilizer you put on. So I would definitely push soil tests. I know in the grand scheme of things, they're not that expensive, 10, 20, $30 you can usually find them for. And that's a heck of a lot better than going and spending $1,000 on lime and fertilizer. You may not even need that fertilizer. So I would definitely stress guys to start with the soil test.
Yeah, and something that I've found, if you're close to a high school that has like 4-H or some sort of ag program, they will soil test it for you as a class project. I do that, and they will have, and it's cool because like you get to see each kid's breakdown, and you can kind of pick and choose. Obviously it's going to be relatively similar because it's the same dirt, but I've been doing that, and I've kind of corn is so. It just sucks it out, So I have found myself going away from that and really just hitting clover and then rotating, some other things. But I quit with the corn. I still plant it as screens, but as far as like acre to 4 acre of just straight corn, I'm just like I'm not doing that now.
It's so tedious to plant corn too, and there's no food provided for them in the summer. There's no food provided for them early fall. As soon as it gets cold, they're going to hit that 1 acre for 2 weeks and it's going to be completely wiped out. And then they have no food again for almost another year. And that's where clover comes in, or your brassicas with the greens and the turnips and radishes, your oats, your winter peas, winter rye. I love watching corn grow. Don't get me wrong. We plant a bunch of it, but I don't know why we plant a bunch of it. I think I just fall into that category of like watching it grow in the summer, and it's fun watching those rows pop up and stuff. But as far as a deer perspective goes, there's not a whole lot of food there, and it's a lot of input. I mean, like I said, I plant corn, and I plant soybeans, and we layer it though. We'll go in between the rows and we'll plant stuff later on, so there's more food there. But row crop, deer love it. But it's just a short-term food source, and it's a hell of a lot of work to get that stuff to grow right, as you probably know.
Yeah, it seems like such a small portion of the season do we even get to hunt corn that's cut or soybeans that it's cut, because most of the time soybeans are cut before I even get to hit a tree stand where I'm at. And then they really don't get the corn. Last year they got it out pretty early, but it seemed like the later on it's already been wiped out. They've already hit those fields so hard, and then time I get in the woods October 1st, they're really hitting them acorns the hardest.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, opening weekend for us is mid-September up here, and that's everything's green until about mid-October here, just to give you guys an idea. But they hit those acorns harder than anything that first 2 weeks of season. I've seen some of the biggest bucks early in the year, not on food source, not on clover, not on soybeans. They're going to be in the woods on those clover, and it's hard to hunt them because we're big timber. So, picking out those points is super important. Picking out those saddles, truly learning. I mean, sometimes you just got to do your homework and put time in the woods and figure out how those deer use the hills. But, I mean, acorns are so underrated and they're already there.
Yeah. It's like clockwork. Last year, between the plots I had here, I mean, you talk about could check your trail camera, and exactly at the same time every day they were hitting these clover plots. And then it's like the first big windstorm came through, and the deer were just gone. And I was like, I know exactly where they're at. And I mean, switch the camera up straight to the oaks, and it was just like they have this well manicured buffet, and they don't even care anymore because they're after those acorns. And we have so many acorns here. I mean, when they start dropping, you have to be careful walking because you'll roll your ankle on them. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I don't doubt it.
It's hard to really get dialed in on the particular farms that I hunt for oaks because it's such a small piece and it's satellite woods with, with big ag. It's hard for me to get in there to hunt them because they're not but 50 yards from where they want to be eaten anyways.
Right.
That time of the year. So that can be hard, access and, egress and degress, leaving the woods. It can be hard to sneak in on them big bucks. So that's why a lot of people here where I'm at, a lot of people shy away from that early season, big buck hunts, which we talked to Jason Say from Realtree in episode 100. And he liked to focus on that, like the first week of
first weekend opening day.
He's smacking big ones. I'm like, man, I understand what you're saying, but I can't get myself to get in there that early because all I'm doing is pushing them right back out the other side.
Yeah.
And then all I'm doing is hunting does for 15 to 20 days.
Right. Yeah, you definitely gotta be careful, and it's hard too because food plots you can beat out your neighbors with food plots. Have a better food plot than them. Have better topography. As far as food plot architecture goes, make those soft edges, Dylan, that you're talking about. And those hinge cuts. But every neighbor, I don't say every neighbor, but take it with a grain of salt. Every neighbor has oaks. And they have acorns, so that's why it's so hard to kill them early in the year. But small things like, I know in September they're not hitting mock scrapes as much, but they're starting to play around with them a little bit, as they're passing. Small water holes in the woods have been, super successful for us. Not killing deer early, but patterning them, I would say. Water holes are definitely gonna be important, and it's amazing how much pulling power a 40-gallon black tub has in the woods full of water, especially coming pre-rut. So that's been a couple tricks that we've been using, and like I said, we haven't been killing deer on it, but if we had more time to hunt, we probably would.
Yeah,
the cameras are definitely telling us that.
Yeah, and I've been super cautious. Like we just cut a new food plot in, and we cut a bunch of saplings, 10-foot trees out. And there was one perfect in the center, and my buddy went to cut it, and I was like, no, leave that one.
Yeah.
I was like, it's head high with all the branches all the way around. I was like, it's dead center of this field. The way that it's in this valley, it's just going to pull. There's a creek around. I was like, leave that tree right there. And I was like, I'll ask me why in February, and I'll show you all the pictures of what's going to happen to that tree.
Hang a rope off of it.
Yeah, and it's just like, so when I do mine, are you guys doing like the edges, leaving the edges tall so they feel safe once they're in it, or that they physically have to come into it to see it so they can't scan?
Yeah, we do some of those e-consults, guys will do those. We've been preaching that to those guys. And on our personal properties, I've done a comparison with the fields with, 10 to 15 feet on the edge versus just a hard edge right up to the woods. 100% feel more comfortable, in those fields. And, I just let it grow up into weeds, but, God, I wish it's getting a little late in the year to plant switchgrass this year, but, I'm gonna try to incorporate some switchgrass here so I don't have to stop. I can stop messing with it, and get 3 to 4 foot, 5 foot switchgrass around those edges of the plots, just so I have something perennial there too. And 100% soft edges are becoming more and more popular too, and more guys are talking about it as well.
Yeah, we have one of my fields. It's about probably an 8.5 acre field, and the way that it rolls, it literally just so you can see from different. So I quit cutting it fully and I'm stripping it. I'm doing 50 yards, then 20 yards high, and then 50 yards, almost like a Texas strip. And man, I was bush hogging 2 nights ago, and there was a buck literally comes out of the soft. Like I could see his head coming through. He walks out with me in the field. He walks, about 50 yards up, and then he just dips right back off. And then I watched him just disappear kind of, through it. And I was like, okay, well, that's doing pretty good for me then. If he's feeling comfortable enough, at 8:30 to slip on out and up. But I want to do switchgrass too. Kind of what I'm doing now is I'm not mowing it and then letting it grow super thick all year.
Right.
And then in like February, I'm going through knocking it down and then letting it regrow so that I keep the trees from sprouting up.
Right. Yep, for sure. Yeah, mowing I prefer over burning too, because burning you can do slightly wrong, and then you can burn your plants if they're starting to grow already. Unless you have a really dry winter and it's early January and you have plenty of time. But definitely mowing is going to be the favorite route of maintaining the switchgrass.
What about fertilizer on your food plots? What's the kind of the thought process on fertilizer?
Yeah. So, I mean, those soil tests will tell you, what nutrients are needed. We got those liquid fertilizers we've been preaching about a lot. So we've been running all of those last couple of years now. So, I planted what I've got in the ground already. Granted, you guys, it was 35 degrees back at home this morning.
Oh
It,
wow,
Wow.
it was raining. The high was 42 degrees back where I live. So
wow! I
it's
would have taken that over
yeah,
80 some
it,
degrees.
it just greened up like 2 weeks ago.
Oh
Buds,
no.
Wow.
leaves just came on the tree. Yeah. So what I've got in the ground right now, I've got corn, bean, my clovers, my alfalfa, and some oats with that clover and alfalfa. And I spray the crank, the 318-18 on everything. And that's kind of like our starter fertilizer. And all your legumes, so your soybeans, your clovers, your alfalfa, all of your nitrogen fixing plants, those plants don't need nitrogen. But everything else, your brassicas and my corn, I'm going to go ahead and spray the freight train on, which is our 2500. And both the liquids that we have, they've been super great. Just some science, I guess, behind the liquids and the thought process of why liquid versus granular. Also, too, if you look at farmers, they're all using liquid fertilizer now. They're not using granular. There's still a handful of them.
Mhm.
But a lot of guys are shooting, starter fertilizer when they're planting their row crop. It's because liquid is 90% absorbable to the plant, where granular is only 30% absorbable. And that's not like a sales tactic. That's honest to God, that's the facts of liquid fertilizer. The ones that we opted with, the 318-18 and the freight train, the 2500, those are slow release fertilizers. So they're going to stay active in the soil for 200 to 300 days. So it creates a super long lasting effect versus granular kind of gets flushed through the soil quick, gets absorbed, and then it's over. But we've been seeing corn staying green longer into the fall, no matter the maturity, your clover staying more healthy. And it's both of those, the 318-18 and the 2500. They're they're slow release, but you can spray them on the plants or on the dirt when you're planting too. So it's just nice how much you can utilize them. You're not going to burn your plants at all. So, I mean, that's, I guess, kind of the fertilizer, aspects of it. Obviously listen to your soil tests, but yeah, we've been switching over to fertilizer and we've had really good results with it.
So are
I
you a like no till, you disking, or
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I've got a handful of both. I no-till and I disc plots. If I disc them, it's just because there's a lot of thatch, but I try to no-till everything. We've got no-till drill and corn planter too. So that helps a lot. There's special nozzles they make for your sprayers too. They're called jet stream nozzles. So it comes out in a thicker paste and goes into the soil. So if it comes out like a mist, it's going to stick on the debris on the top. So the jet stream, the heavier stream allows it to get to that soil. So we've been using the jet stream nozzles for our no-till stuff. Otherwise, we'll spray it right on the soil when, that soil's been turned.
Yeah, I've kind of quit. I got away from like the plow and deep
Yep.
stuff. So I'll just mow it super. I mean, I'll scalp it, and then I'll
Yep.
wait a couple days, and then I'll come through and I'd say I'm like a medium disc.
Yep.
I'll get it turned, and then I'll plant it, and I'll drag, and then I'll just kind of let it take
Yep.
over. And I've had extremely good luck. Now
Yeah.
we have a lot of super rocky soil
Okay.
here. It's super rich, but it is extremely rocky. So
Yeah.
I have to pretty much, if I'm going to do a food plot, I'll like when we first cut it in, I'll disc the piss out of it,
Right.
and then we'll spend a day just picking up rocks and shifting them out, and then that's when we'll just
Yeah.
start. And when I say overseed, I'm talking we overseed with clover,
Yep.
and then disc it again just to disperse it. And
Sure.
I've had pretty good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wisconsin's in the sand belt, where we're at, northern Wisconsin, it's not beach sand like the southern guys have, but it's your pretty close to your blow sand, not a lot of organic matter in it. And man, I love turning dirt. Nothing better than sitting on a tractor watching the dirt, your disc throw it around. And as much as I love doing it, we no-tilled everything this spring. We've had really good results with doing that. And I'm jealous because I want to till, but gosh, there's just so many weeds that come, and
Yeah.
I know it's just better off not, not disking and stuff
Yeah.
for us personally.
That natural forbs, the bank that it just releases, you'll see grass that you've never seen before, and
Right.
it ignites.
Yeah.
There was a professor from the University of Tennessee that was talking about disking and the forbs and the natural grasses that it releases, and I was like, oh, it can't be that bad, And then I've noticed over the years, like, it grows 10 times faster than what clover or anything else will grow, and just
Yep.
choke your stuff out.
Right. Right. I mean, every time you till, you're unearthing those weeds in the ground. And I mean, those seeds have been there for probably millions of years, if
Yeah.
that soil's never been turned. And it's so weird to think, even like, I mean, I sell seed for a living, and it's just so dumb to me how a seed can sit in a jug for 5-10 years. It doesn't with us, but it could sit in a bag, or it could sit for a long time. As soon as it touches soil, it just knows to wake up and start growing.
Yeah.
That's crazy for sure.
I mean, it's just dumbfounding to me. I love it. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with it, obviously, but
It
it's
really
just
is
crazy.
cool. I've got a 4-year-old. She's fixing to be 5, and she helps me with all the food plots. And we've
Yeah.
actually she's gotten some plastic see-through cups, and
Mhm.
we've put dirt, and she's growing like little bean, like she's just doing
Yep.
her own little thing. And it is crazy how it just knows as soon as it touches
I
that
know.
it can just take off.
It's crazy. Yeah, it is bizarre for sure.
Best way to manage weeds in your food plots.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about clover, since that's kind of the theme, of what guys are trying to keep weeds out of anyway.
Mhm.
Especially like Tennessee, you guys are probably mowing your first clover, I would think, getting close to it.
Yeah.
Or at least thinking about mowing your clover. Mowing is going to take care of a lot of broadleaf weeds. So I'm going to say broadleaf and grass weeds. Those are the two category of weeds. Obviously your grass is grass, but your broadleaf weeds are pretty much everything that's on the grass. But mowing is going to take care of all those broadleaf weeds. If you think about your yard at your house, you're not facing a bunch of broadleaf weeds. It's just grass. Those broadleaf weeds know that they don't belong there once they're getting mowed repetitively. They don't try to come back a bench after time. Now, clover will. That's why you notice you probably might have a little clover in your yard just naturally.
Right.
So when it comes to grasses in clover plots, once you've taken out all the broadleaf weeds through mowing, there's a super simple spray called clethodim that's going to kill all those grasses in the clover plot, and it is dumbfounding how well it works. It takes a little while to activate and start. Roundup or glyphosate, will kill everything pretty much within a week. Clethodim, you probably won't notice anything for about a week, and then it starts to brown. But it's going to kill all of those grass weeds in the plot. And then your clover is just going to flourish after that. We usually spray clethodim on our clover plots about once or twice a year, depending on competition. But mowing is going to be your best friend with it for sure.
I know this may be a stupid question, but did you go to school for like ag?
I did not. I was a good kid in high school, man. I graduated almost with a 4.0. I thought about college. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. An opportunity rose with Domain, and Mike's asked if I want to be full time, and I said, let's figure out some numbers, dude. And we did, and it's been great. I didn't go to school, since high school. I took pretty much every ag class in high school. I always paid attention. I was well-rounded, listened, pretty much in every class. Even if I didn't like it, I still listened because I had nothing better to do.
Right.
But during high school, I think I watched every food plot video on YouTube on food plots, and I got every single everybody's opinion. I mean, I've been tinkering with food plots since I was like probably 14 years old, by myself, not with dad around. I mean, dad's around, but not helping me. No, I never went to school. I've just been picking up on stuff, and you learn a lot by doing it throughout the years, what works, what doesn't. And that's why I always say it works for me. It might not work for you, but working with Domain and all the clients I talk to and all the people at shows and, their stories and showing pictures, you learn a lot. And, if you, pay attention to what works and what doesn't, then you can, advise pretty much every guy with every soil type, and every location. Tennessee, I have a really good idea of what your guys' soil is. And I know, obviously I don't know, every property, but
Right.
I've got a good idea of,
Right.
soil types around the US just from talking with guys. And, no, I would love to go to like a ag school, I guess, to learn about soil, but I feel like, not to boast, but I feel like I know just a lot from talking to customers.
Yeah.
Right.
And almost teaching myself and learning through other people is, I mean, just like you guys know, you're going to hire somebody with 10 years of experience versus somebody straight out of school, and
Yeah.
that's, I feel like I have a lot of experience for, I guess, my age and just the amount of people I talk to. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, sounds like you grew up, on the farm and that sort of thing, which I grew up around it, just not on it like a lot of people did around me. And you really sometimes don't even really need that particular school.
Right.
You've been doing it your whole childhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you pick it up a little bit faster, I would imagine.
Right. And growing up, I mean, my generation, growing up on YouTube, you can watch pretty much whatever you want. And I opted to watch how to grow food plot videos. And I'll tell you a sleeper food plot trick, man. I've joined a lot of Facebook groups of small farmers. So small farmers in America, small farmer, just those type of groups. Cause those guys, not to like be rude or anything, but typically those guys are, doing, low cost effective stuff. They don't have a bunch of money they can play around with to tinker, so they're obviously doing what they think is right. And I read a bunch of those, and if this comes through the video good, I'd love to show a picture. Like, this is something I just found fascinating, this week. And this is the same guy's field, and he didn't get to spray his corn on one side until it was germinated and 14 days after the corn was growing, versus he terminated the day the corn was growing.
Oh, wow.
And it's just stuff like that I find so intriguing. And I just learned from it. And, if guys like, well, I'm thinking about letting my corn germinate and then spray off, then going forward, I'm like, no, don't do that. And I have my receipts, and I'll show him that picture, and he'll be like, oh, I guess I won't do that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, to have a nice plot when you start out, you work, you're eager and you spend a lot of time on it to understand and realize how much of a beast nature is. And nature's going to take over faster than you realize. And sometimes it seems like it can do it overnight. And so when you walk out and you see that, you don't get those instant results because you didn't prep the dirt right, or you didn't cut back. It's like you get on YouTube University, you get on the scroll hole, and then it's just countless hours of just, okay, well, this, like you said, this guy done this. And it's just, it's one of those things where if you're passionate about it, then you're going to figure it out pretty quick, and all that information holds.
Yep. And I think one thing too, I had nothing but food plot failures for probably 3 years in a row, way back when I was young. And the eagerness of wanting to get it right and have a good food plot, I was just kept driving for it. And, like I said, I started out with a small little wood plot in the woods. First year I had no sunlight. The plants folded over and kind of looked white and viney. I'm like, okay, we need to cut down some trees. Talked to, the father, and we cut down some trees, and the next year that stuff grew. And then, being sandy soil, you got to take care of that type of sand, because I'm not blessed to have, beautiful dirt on our property. It's really hard to grow stuff, and that's why I'm the perfect candidate for customer support. Because if I can get stuff to grow on shitty soil, I bet you I can help somebody else to do it. So, it's it always works out. And I think it was actually a blessing to have shitty soil, unfortunately, and it still bites me in the ass sometimes. But I've definitely learned a lot more, for sure.
We've talked on here before, you bringing up the whole YouTube thing. I want to get kind of your opinion on it.
Yeah.
From your generation, you had that YouTube to lean on, and I'm talking more of the hunting aspect.
Yeah.
Compared to somebody maybe me and Dylan's age, where we really didn't have that YouTube until we got older, and we got more of that experience just being in the woods and learning those vocalizations, or the rut, or this or that. Do you think that YouTube kind of takes the learning curve out of it just a little bit? I
think it definitely increases how fast you can, learn and figure out stuff. I think there's a lot to play around with in the field. YouTube can preach as much as they want, hunting videos of playing the wind, but you got to learn how to hunt your property as well.
Right.
And that's just one small example, but definitely, I think YouTube's definitely created some cheat codes, and talking. I mean, as much as, talking to your neighbors and seeing what they're seeing too, if they're willing to, stay open and give you guys, try to create plans in your neighborhood of how to kill mature deer, and getting on the same page is definitely going to help,
Mm-hmm.
But no, as far as YouTube goes, I mean, watch a lot of YouTube videos, and there's a lot of different ways to kill mature deer too.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I've heard of people saying that, hey, I've watched a bunch of YouTube videos. I got super excited about it. I went out and it was nothing like the YouTube videos. I was cold and
Yeah.
I'm not going back. And I'm like, well, it's one of those things where you really do, if you're not born into it or you have a mentor or somebody to kind of show you, YouTube can be kind of deceiving when it comes to that on
Oh
expectations,
yeah.
especially with the food plot stuff, because they're like, it shows them prep the dirt, throw the
Yep.
seed, and then they've got this big luscious food plot, and you're like, it's not like that. I
Right.
promise. Like, there's
Yep.
a lot of work they're editing out.
Oh yeah, and we'll do. I mean, obviously, we do a lot of content with Domain. I'm usually the guy behind the camera, and it's funny. Our content days usually just turn out to everybody working, and then we get 20 pictures. It's like, son of a bitch, we got to go do content again. Because we just turned out to, we were just working. And,
But it's fun, like it's
Oh, yeah.
enjoyable. I mean,
Yeah.
I put in 30 plus hours last week on the farm
Oh,
after
yeah.
my normal job. And I was telling Brad, I was like, oh, dude, I ran out of daylight or I'd still be out there. And my
Yep.
tractor has headlights, so I'm coming in at dang near 10 o'clock. And I'm like, I wish I had, a couple more passes or had done. It's just so crazy how addicting it becomes. And then seeing the deer pour out and eat, or the turkey strutting in the clover, it's just like, all right, well, I need more. I've got to figure out how to make more.
How
Right.
is your
Oh, yeah.
how is your working food plots and that sort of thing? How is that kind of spilled over into your land management and your herd management for whitetails?
I mean, I'm a sucker for shooting a good deer. So as far as herd management goes, I'm working on it, but it is hard for me to still pass a nice 3.5-year-old deer, and I'm getting better at it. But I just love shooting deer. So I think I told myself last year that I'm not shooting a young deer. We're waiting for 4.5 or 5.5-year-old deer. And then our only 4.5-year-old deer got shot. And then I was like, well, gates are open. So then I shot a nice 3-year-old the next day that I already passed, So
Yeah.
That's awesome.
but as far as like food plot architecture goes, if another words of advice that I have that works well on our property and clients too is don't have straight edges. Deer don't like straight edges. But again, too, like with those soft edges, if you can create, don't just have a straight line. Create a little squiggle to it. That's always going to go a long ways. Like you said, you had zigzag corn. That's perfect. Not giving those deer a straight away is going to make them spend more time, because walking like this takes longer than walking in a straight line. But as far as like property management goes, unfortunately, I can't hinge cut away yet because I don't own the property. But as soon as I do, that whole 30 acres is getting hinge cut. But, yeah, I mean, definitely have learned a lot. We try to advise guys too, and we have about 10 of us now full time, and we all tinker on our properties differently, and we share what works with us, and we share. We'll see clips online of like, hey, have you guys seen this or heard of it? What's it working for you? Because I mean, we're not quite a dictionary. We don't know everything yet. We're getting there, but I don't think you'll ever know everything about deer hunting. You never will. You're always going to pick up on new stuff, and that's why it's so fun too. And that's why sitting in a tree stand and seeing how the deer react to your food plots, and taking that knowledge and going with it next year. And I mean, if you're sitting in a tree stand over a food plot, I can guarantee you every guy is thinking about what they're doing next year. That's just how we operate. We're always thinking ahead. So, fall is a time to reap rewards, but that's definitely is, when you're planning for the following year.
Right. Well, let's talk about Domain.
Yeah.
Talk about seeds and your products and what you guys got coming out and what's coming out in the future and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So Domain started up in 2019 by Mike and his brother-in-law, Tim. Mike pretty much runs the ship right now. He's in the, he's our boss. He's boss man. Tim still works his full-time job, so he's not in the warehouse quite as much. He comes in for like our monthly podcast we do on Facebook Live.
Mm-hmm.
But when we started up, we got pushing close to 20 different mixes, all the way from clovers to, to all your brassica mixes, everything like that, screens, don't currently have corn or soybean, but we're working on it. So hopefully that's in the near future. I mean, it's hard. I can't quite talk on some test stuff that we're working on, but we're launching a new seed, I think, in the end of May here, or early June. We're launching a new blend that's going to be an exclusive to a store. So that's going to be sweet. But I mean, the main thing too, I know guys, it's going to be overwhelming saying I got 20 different seed mixes, but if you go to Domain and then one of the tabs on the top is going to be seed selection charts or selection charts, click that and it's going to be an awesome chart with all the blends and it lays out the conditions, sunny food plot, shaded food plot, low pH, all your conditions. There's about 10 of them, I would say, and it kind of check marks which mixes are going to be good with that. So that's a good way to, help yourself and try to find some mixes that'll be well on your property. If you're listening to and wanting to know more direct, domain stuff, just feel free to reach out to us. We field, I bet you I answered 50 customers today on our emails and DMs and stuff like that. So, we have a handful of guys, reaching out. So just, DM us on any platform or, info@domainoutdoor.com is our email. You can find on the website too. But, yeah, I mean, that's the key for sure.
Tell us about what you got in store personally for this fall for deer hunting.
I was just talking to my buddy too, because we're trying to figure out some time to hang out and bullshit just like this. And I said, man, my last weekend in town for the year is July 4th. And I'll probably be at our family cabin with the family. He's like,
right.
No freaking way. I said, yeah, because I work shows and stuff all end of summer. But as far as I got 2 shows back or every other weekend in August. So in between there, I scheduled the Access hunt in Texas. So that's going to be my first hunt of the year.
Nice.
Then we'll go straight up to North Dakota to hunt whitetails and velvet. That's always been fun. It's a fun camp. I think we're going to go straight from North Dakota to Wyoming to hunt pronghorn. Then I'm going to come home. I've got a bear tag for Wisconsin. So I'm going to try to put a bear on the ground. Never done it before. So that's going to be a whole different thing for me.
I bet.
I almost feel bad shooting Yogi, man. I'm still trying to work up the courage, but we got about a bunch of bears by the house and they're kind of becoming a nuisance. So I'm not gonna have too bad of a problem with it. But after bears, we got, try to fill that Wisconsin tag, hunt a couple, neighboring states. We'll get over to Minnesota. I got a place over there. Missouri public we run. That's always fun.
Oh yeah.
Public's always intriguing. Last year was the first year we did it. And I think it was 3 hours into the hunt. I shot a nice buck on public, and that was just dumb luck. We went back down there and did some shed hunting and tried to learn some of the properties too. And I've got a pretty good idea of what I'm going to do this year. And I know right after we left, a good 160 came out of there from another guy we knew. So I know there's some big deer in the area, and it's a good area too. When the private right next to it is standing beans with like 5 rednecks on the field. So
yeah,
sure.
we're in the right area there. Otherwise, that's I think going to be a wrap. That sounds expensive enough to me, so I think I'm going to call it there.
Yeah, we know all about that for sure. And yes, Missouri public land. I hate to even say it, and I've said it so many times on here that it's almost everybody knows that I'm going to say it. But like we had a buddy that went with us this year. He killed a 216 at the house. And then this, 3 days later, he shoots a 165 on public there in Missouri. I mean, he shot over 330 some inches in just a couple of days. I mean, that's a dream of a season.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Oh yeah, we go to Kentucky too. That's another one. We do a late season hunt there, so that's always fun. We do that with the outfitter over there. We've been going to for a couple of years. But yeah, that's hopefully you don't shoot all those because that's a heavy taxidermist bill.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Mortgage. Yep, but no, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Is that bear tag that you were talking about? Is that a draw type of thing?
Yeah, it takes three years for a resident to get a tag where we're at in Wisconsin. Yep.
Gotcha.
And there's different zones you can pull, but like the northern zones where like just hills are and stuff in Wisconsin, the wolves are at. You can get a tag, I think, every year, but that's a dog unit, and I don't feel like chasing bears around dogs. Just doesn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't like that at all.
I done that one time. I done a guided duck hunt with a bear guy,
right.
And we had no clue what we were getting into.
Yeah.
And we meet he's like, we got to be here. And I'm like, dude, that's like 4 hours before the sun comes up. Why do we have to be and it was like 50 trucks pulling to this gas station.
Yeah.
Took an hour and a half for everybody to program everybody's dogs into the GPSs. And then
Yep.
they were assigning people. These 10 people were just driving the roads, picking dogs up when they crossed.
Jeez.
These 30 people were walking fresh dogs in. These 30 were waiting for those dogs to trail and then bringing fresh dogs in and taking these dogs. Like, it was such a, everybody on the CB radio. I think we had like, it was like 5 miles hot holding these tethers with 5 dogs on it. I was like, I'm never doing this again. Like, this is I'm picking up dogs when they cross the street because like, I don't even want to shoot a bear anymore.
Yeah, it's one thing to watch your dog work when you're hunting upland game like pheasants and grouse and stuff, but I don't know, them mountain lion hunts, they just don't feel right in my head. Them poor little cats are helpless up in the tree, and I'm like, God, I just don't think I can do it.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about shooting does with fawns now too. I don't know if it's me getting older. I just not a fan of ruining the little life cycle there. I don't know why.
Well, I've gotten bad to see my doe and be like, okay, well, they get a pass. But I'm to the point now on my farms. I'm like, I have to shoot a doe.
Right.
Like I have to thin them out. I had like 12 on, this one little food plot right behind my house. I'm like, I've got to thin them out. But then I get out there, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and I get some pass. I get some buddies over at the farm every year, and I let them shoot them because I don't want to take care of them.
Yeah, it's me. I'm after the antler.
Yep. So if some guys are like itching to shoot it, I'm like, come over to my place. There's plenty of them over there. So
yeah.
Yep. And thankfully we shoot enough horned deer that we don't have to shoot for meat. Between Dad and I and all the states where I think our freezers are still probably half full. I got to get eating some venison here so I can refill them this year. But
your 4th of July trip to the cabin, boy, load them up.
Yeah, absolutely. Barbecue for the whole neighborhood.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Well, buddy, I appreciate you coming on and talking some food plot with us, and kind of explaining how Domain does some stuff and the products and all that. We really appreciate you spending some time with us tonight.
No, absolutely. This was fun, boys. Appreciate it.
Dylan, anything before we wrap it up?
No, it's got a podcast again tomorrow night, and then it's back to the food plot stuff. I'm dying 3 nights in a row of podcasts, and I'm looking outside like, I could be doing something. That the boat is ready to work.
Aren't you guys are getting some rain, right? Or is it still on the west side of the state?
No, we got it today. So I'm near like Knoxville and Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area. So we got rocked with it today, and I've got a lot of plots that needed it, and they're coming in. Right. I mean, I can't, dude. I'm like that guy obsessed with his yard, except it's food plots. I'll take the side by side out, and I'll just sit there and look at it, and I'll be like, hey, looks good. Looks good.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, tell everybody where they can find you and find Domain.
Yeah. Domain is Domain Outdoor LLC on pretty much every platform: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that. Myself, Spencer Sutliff on everything. So, yeah.
Awesome.
If you have food plot questions too, reach out. If you want to reach out to me direct, that's perfectly fine.
Awesome. Well, we'll be back here again for episode 116 next week, and we'll see you guys then.